I used to work the overnight shift at a 24-hour gym a few years ago, and most nights were so quiet that the hours felt like they moved in slow motion. After midnight, the crowds disappeared, the music was turned down, and the only sounds left in the building were the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional clank of weights hitting the floor. That's why the man who started showing up every night around 3 in the morning stood out immediately. The strange thing about him wasn't the time he came in. It was what he didn't do once he got there. He never used the machines. At the time I was 23 and working the front desk while finishing my last year of college. The job was pretty simple. I checked people in when they scanned their membership cards, answered questions about memberships, wiped down equipment when things got messy, and occasionally reminded people not to drop weights too hard. Most overnight shifts were boring, which honestly suited me just fine. I usually brought my laptop and worked on assignments between helping the occasional late-night member. The gym itself was located in a large shopping plaza near the edge of town. During the day, the place was packed with people. Every treadmill would be full, and you'd hear the constant rhythm of machines running and people talking. But after midnight, the gym felt completely different. The building was still fully lit, but the long rows of mirrors made the empty space feel bigger and quieter than it really was. Every movement echoed slightly. Every sound carried across the room. And sometimes, if no one else was around, it almost felt like the building itself was watching you. One night around 3 in the morning, I was sitting behind the front desk scrolling through my phone when I heard the front door open. I looked up automatically. A tall man stepped inside. He was wearing a dark hoodie and gray sweatpants. The hood was pulled up slightly, casting a shadow over most of his face. He walked over to the scanner near the front desk and swiped a membership card. The scanner beeped. Then he walked past me without saying a word and headed toward the gym floor. At first, nothing about that seemed unusual. People came in late all the time. But about 10 minutes later, something about the situation started to feel strange. Because the man hadn't started working out. Instead, he was just standing there. He was near the treadmills, facing the rest of the gym floor. Watching. At the time, there were only 2 other people in the building. One guy was lifting weights near the squat racks, and another was doing cardio on a stationary bike. The tall man didn't interact with either of them. He just stood there, completely still, looking around the room. Eventually, I assumed maybe he was waiting for someone. So I went back to my laptop and didn't think much about it. About 15 minutes later, I heard the front door open again. I glanced up. The tall man had already left. I shrugged and went back to my work. But the next night, around the exact same time, he came back. 3 in the morning. Same hoodie. Same quiet walk through the front door. Same silent scan of the membership card. And once again, he didn't use any equipment. He just walked slowly through the gym, looking at people, watching them lift weights, watching them run on treadmills, watching them stretch, but never once touching a machine himself. At first I thought maybe he was just new and figuring out where everything was. But after a few days, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every night around 3, the same man arrived. And every night he did the exact same thing. He walked around the gym slowly, observing everyone else. Then after about 20 minutes, he would leave. The thing that started to make me uncomfortable was how quiet he was. Most gym members at least nod or say hello when they check in. This guy never spoke a single word. Not to me. Not to anyone else. About a week after he started coming in, I noticed something else. Something that made the situation feel different. Our gym had security cameras mounted in the corners of the ceiling. They covered the entire workout area, the locker room hallway, and the front entrance. One night I watched the tall man walk past the treadmills and stopped directly under one of those cameras. He stood there for several seconds. Then he slowly tilted his head upward and stared straight at it. Not like someone casually noticing it, more like someone studying it, trying to understand where it was pointing. After a moment, he continued walking. A few minutes later, he stopped beneath another camera and did the same thing. By the end of that night, he had paused under nearly every camera in the gym, just looking. That was the first moment I felt genuinely uneasy about him. The next night he came back again. 3 in the morning. Same routine. Except this time the gym was almost completely empty. Only one other member was working out, and he was lifting weights on the far side of the room. The tall man walked through the entrance and scanned his card like usual. Then instead of heading straight for the treadmills, he walked toward the front desk. Toward me. I remember feeling my stomach tighten slightly as he approached. He stopped on the other side of the counter. For the first time since I had seen him, he looked directly at me. His face was pale. His eyes were dark and unusually focused. Then he leaned slightly closer to the desk and spoke for the first time. You shouldn't work here alone at night. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but something about the way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Before I could respond, he straightened up and turned away. He walked toward the locker room hallway in the back of the gym. I watched him disappear around the corner. A few seconds passed. Then I heard something. The metallic creak of the emergency exit door opening. That door was located at the far end of the locker room hallway and usually stayed locked unless someone pushed the alarm bar. I frowned and turned toward the security monitor mounted behind the desk. The screen displayed multiple camera angles from around the gym. I clicked to the hallway camera. The tall man was standing near the emergency exit. But he wasn't opening the door. He was just standing there, looking outside through the small window in the door. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was someone standing outside, just beyond the reach of the light. A second figure, waiting near the door. I stared at the screen for several seconds. The tall man opened the door slightly. Then he stepped outside. The door closed behind him. The second figure moved closer to him, but the camera angle didn't show their face. I immediately stood up from the desk and walked over to the front entrance. My heart was beating faster now. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Very wrong. I locked the front doors. Then I called my manager. He told me to contact the police just to be safe. By the time officers arrived and checked the parking lot, the two men were gone. No cars. No one outside. Nothing. The tall man never returned to the gym after that night. At first I thought maybe the whole thing had just been some weird coincidence. But a few days later my manager came in during my shift with a strange expression on his face. He had been reviewing membership records, and something about that man's card had caught his attention. He showed me the account on the computer. The membership number matched the card the man had scanned every night. But the account itself had been canceled months earlier. The person who owned it had moved out of state, which meant the card the man had been using shouldn't have worked at all. The second story happened to me personally a few years later, after I had already stopped working at that gym. By then I had started going to a different fitness center across town. It was another 24-hour gym, but this one didn't keep staff overnight. After midnight, members could still enter using their key cards, but the building ran completely unattended until morning. At first I actually liked that setup. It meant fewer people around, no waiting for equipment, and the quiet atmosphere made it easier to focus on workouts after long days at the office. My usual routine was pretty simple. I'd finish work around 6, grab dinner, then go home and relax for a while. Later in the evening, usually around 11 or midnight, I'd head to the gym. Most nights there would still be a handful of other members there, but occasionally I'd stay late enough that the place would empty out completely. That's what happened one night around 1 in the morning. I had just finished my workout and was pretty exhausted. I had spent nearly an hour doing cardio and lifting, and by the time I walked toward the locker room hallway, the gym floor looked completely empty. The music playing through the speakers had switched to the overnight playlist, which was quieter and slower. The long rows of weight machines sat unused. The mirrors reflected empty spaces where people had been earlier. I glanced around one last time before heading down the hallway. No one. At least that's what I thought. The locker room hallway was narrow and dimly lit compared to the rest of the building. The overhead lights were softer there, casting long shadows along the floor tiles. At the end of the hallway were 2 doors. One led to the men's locker room. The other led to the women's. I pushed open the men's locker room door and stepped inside. The room was empty. A row of metal lockers lined the walls, and the faint smell of cleaning spray lingered in the air. I tossed my gym bag onto the bench and started changing out of my workout clothes. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal. But as I was putting my shirt on, I heard something outside the locker room door. Footsteps. Slow. Steady footsteps moving along the hallway. At first I didn't think much of it. Maybe someone else had just arrived. Even though I hadn't seen anyone on the gym floor, it was possible someone had walked in while I was changing. The footsteps continued. Back and forth. Back and forth. I paused for a moment and listened. The sound was clear enough that I could follow the movement. Whoever it was seemed to be pacing the hallway, walking from one end to the other, then turning around, then walking back again. For a while I ignored it and finished packing my things. But after a few minutes something about the situation started to feel strange, because I never heard the front entrance door open. At that gym, the entrance made a loud mechanical click whenever someone scanned their key card. It was impossible to miss. Yet the building had been completely silent before the footsteps started. And now someone was pacing the hallway outside the locker room. Slowly, deliberately, I walked toward the locker room door and stood there quietly. The footsteps continued. Closer now. Then further away. Then closer again. I waited. Eventually curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the handle and slowly opened the door. The hallway outside was empty. Completely empty. The lights were still on. The floor was clear. No one stood at either end of the hallway. For a moment I just stared out there, confused. Then I stepped into the hallway. The air felt strangely still. I glanced toward the gym floor. Still empty. That's when I heard something behind me. A loud metallic slam. The sound came from inside the locker room. I spun around immediately. The locker room door was still open, but the sound had definitely come from inside. My heart started beating faster. I stepped back into the room. Every locker along the wall was closed. The benches were empty. No one stood inside. I walked slowly along the row of lockers, looking carefully between them. Nothing. No movement. No sound. After a few seconds I told myself the noise must have been something falling inside one of the lockers. Maybe someone had left something loose earlier. Still, the whole situation felt wrong. I grabbed my bag and walked back toward the hallway. The gym floor remained empty. No one had appeared. No one had left. At that point I didn't feel like sticking around any longer. I headed straight for the exit and left the building. The next afternoon I returned to the gym and spoke with the manager. I explained what had happened the night before. At first he looked skeptical, but when I mentioned the pacing footsteps and the locker slamming, his expression changed slightly. He asked what time I had been there. About 1 in the morning, I said. He nodded slowly. Then he suggested we check the security cameras. The gym had cameras covering most of the building, including the hallway outside the locker rooms. We pulled up the footage from the previous night. The video showed me entering the locker room exactly when I remembered. Then the hallway camera stayed focused on the door for the next several minutes. At first nothing happened. Then I noticed something strange. A shadow appeared near the edge of the frame. Someone was standing just outside the locker room door. But they weren't pacing like I had heard. They were standing still, facing the door, watching it. My stomach tightened as I leaned closer to the screen. The person stayed there the entire time I was inside the locker room. Not moving, not walking away, just standing there, waiting. The strangest part was what happened next. The moment I opened the locker room door in the video, the figure disappeared. Not by walking away, not by turning a corner. It simply moved out of frame so quickly that the camera never caught where it went. I remember looking at the manager. Neither of us said anything for several seconds. Then he rewound the footage and played it again. The result was the same. Someone had been standing outside that door while I was inside the locker room, watching. But when I stepped into the hallway had been completely empty. The third story happened not long after I moved to a new city for work. At the time I didn't know many people there yet, and my job kept me busy during the day. Going to the gym had become one of the only ways I could relax and keep some kind of routine. The gym I joined was open 24 hours, which worked perfectly with my schedule. Most days I didn't finish work until late, so I usually went to the gym sometime after midnight. Late night workouts had a completely different atmosphere compared to the daytime crowd. During the day the place was loud and full of energy. Music played over the speakers, machines were constantly running, and people talked between sets. But after midnight, the gym felt almost like a different building. The music was quieter, the lights felt harsher, and the echo of footsteps carried across the entire room. Most nights there were only 2 or 3 other people working out, sometimes even fewer. One night around 2 in the morning, I arrived for my usual workout and noticed the gym floor was almost empty. Only one person was lifting weights near the far wall. The rest of the machines sat unused. I started my routine with some stretching, then walked over to the treadmills. The treadmills were arranged in a long row facing a wall covered in mirrors. When they were all running at the same time during the day, the room filled with the sound of footsteps and machine motors. But that night only one treadmill was running. I started jogging at a comfortable pace and settled into the rhythm of the workout. For the first 10 minutes everything felt normal. Then someone stepped onto the treadmill next to mine. I noticed him in the mirror first. He was tall and lean, wearing dark workout clothes and a pair of large headphones over his ears. He didn't look at me when he stepped onto the machine. He simply pressed a few buttons on the control panel and started running. At first I didn't think anything about it. It was pretty common for people to choose machines near others when the room felt empty. But after a while something about the situation began to feel strange. The man's running pace never changed. Not even slightly. Most people adjust their speed every few minutes. They slow down, speed up, or change the incline. This guy didn't. He just kept running. Same speed, same steady rhythm. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I began to notice something else. He wasn't breathing heavily. Normally after running for that long, people show some sign of exhaustion. Sweating, heavy breathing, a change in posture. But this guy looked exactly the same as when he started. Completely calm, completely steady. I tried focusing on my own workout and ignored it for a while. But eventually curiosity got the better of me. I glanced toward the control panel on his treadmill. The speed setting hadn't changed since he started. And yet he was still running effortlessly. By the 40-minute mark I was getting tired. My breathing had become heavier, and my legs were starting to feel the strain. The man beside me still hadn't changed his pace. That's when I noticed something else. He hadn't looked at the screen once. Most runners check their progress occasionally. Distance. Calories. But he never glanced down. He just stared straight ahead. Through the mirror. At the reflection of the room behind us. That's when a strange thought crossed my mind. What if he wasn't actually looking at the mirror? What if he was looking at me? The idea made me uncomfortable enough that I slowed my treadmill slightly. My footsteps became quieter, but the machine beside me continued at the same steady pace. The man kept running. 45 minutes. Then 50. At that point I was exhausted. I hit the stop button on my treadmill and stepped off the machine. The belt slowed to a stop beneath my feet. The sudden silence made the room feel even larger. The only sound left was the treadmill beside me still running. I grabbed my towel and wiped the sweat from my face. Then I looked over, and my stomach dropped. The treadmill was still moving, but the man wasn't there anymore. The machine was running at the same speed, but the space above the belt was empty. For a moment I just stood there, confused. I looked around the gym floor. The guy lifting weights earlier was gone. The rest of the machines were empty. No one stood near the treadmills. I checked behind me. Nothing. No one walking toward the locker rooms. No one leaving through the entrance. I stepped closer to the treadmill beside mine. The belt was still moving. Same speed, same rhythm, but there was no one running on it. I stared at it for several seconds before finally reaching over and pressing the stop button. The machine slowed down and came to a stop. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the entire building was holding its breath. I suddenly didn't feel like staying there any longer. I grabbed my gym bag and headed for the exit. The next day I returned to the gym during the afternoon. The place was busy again. Music playing, machines running, people talking. The whole environment felt normal. Still, the memory of the night before kept bothering me. Eventually I asked one of the staff members if we could check the security cameras. He looked a little confused but agreed. We pulled up the footage from around 2 in the morning. The video showed me walking into the gym, then stepping onto the treadmill. For the next 45 minutes the camera stayed focused on the row of machines. I watched the screen carefully. My treadmill was clearly visible, but the machine beside it had been empty the entire time. No one had stepped onto it. No one had been running there. The belt never even started moving. I remember leaning back in the chair and staring at the monitor, because according to the footage, I had been running alone the entire time. Even now, years later, I still go to the gym regularly. But I avoid the late night hours whenever I can. Because sometimes when I walk past the treadmills, I catch myself glancing at the machine beside mine, half expecting to see someone running there, keeping perfect pace, even though no one else is in the room. If you enjoy hearing true horror stories like these late-night encounters, consider subscribing to Midnight Scary Stories for more disturbing stories every week. And let me know in the comments which story unsettled you the most tonight. Also, don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it. It really helps the channel grow. But until next time, if you ever find yourself alone in a quiet gym late at night, you might want to check the mirrors, just in case someone is standing behind you.